Hey, my name is S. I'm queer and non-binary, and I'm a personal trainer. I got into personal training as a way to create safe and affirming movement space for other queer, non-binary, and trans folks in particular, but for lots of different folks in general. I've been an athlete my entire life, and I have experienced a lot of toxic misogyny and toxic masculinity in that time. And I've experienced a lot of the ways that traditional fitness spaces and culture alienate and pathologize and harm queer and trans bodies. My experience in these settings is what has led me to become a personal trainer and an advocate and a voice for queer and trans folks in fitness settings. And due to a pretty serious injury that I incurred in my own training as a result of not being seen and acknowledged and heard and made to feel safe in a gym setting, I really took a lot of time to renegotiate and relearn my body and my understanding of fitness and my relationship with exercise. And now I am here as someone who really wants to create safety in movement and space for other folks who are typically alienated and pathologized and harmed in traditional fitness spaces to feel safe and to learn movement and to learn how to use these tools to be in relationship with their own bodies, to be in connection and to be stronger and more empowered and more joyful. Some tips that I have for folks who are looking for a place to begin with movement training but haven't had any experience or are unclear as to where to start are 5 things. To start with the basics, to start small, to go slowly, to check in with your body, and to ask for support. I'm going to explain a little bit more about each of these. Starting with the basics. What I mean by this is starting with very simple movements that are foundational to some of the other movements that you might want to try later down the line. Oftentimes people see a lot of folks doing really fancy stuff on the internet, perhaps on YouTube or Instagram, things where you're throwing weight up over your head, etc. And those things are wonderful. However, those things require a base of strength and movement and safety in that movement and loading that can be achieved through some basic movement patterns like squats or hinges, basic pushes and pulls like a push-up or an overhead press, maybe a row, either seated or bent. So I encourage folks to really start with those foundational movements, those squats, those hinges and pushes and pulls, before diving into anything that's more of a compound movement that requires multiple different joints and to be loaded in combination and perhaps with speed. Tip number 2 is to start small. And what I mean by this is to pick a handful of movements that you want to focus on and really focus on maybe doing up to 3 of those movements on a given day, and maybe only 2 to 3 sets of between 6 and 10 repetitions, depending on the movement, but really to go with a low volume or starting small, and to maybe only start with 2 days a week of movements, simply to get a sense of how these movements feel, how taxing they might be for your body, and to make sure that when you're doing them and you're loading them, you're not experiencing any pain or anything that's going to potentially make you feel overly sore or fatigued the next day. Tip number 3 is to go slowly. And what I mean by this is having to do with sort of progressing yourself slowly. When you're doing strength training, the way that you get stronger is actually that you're adapting to being challenged in a new way. Your muscles are being challenged to do something they haven't done before. And in order to make that challenge sustainable, I encourage folks to start slowly, which basically just means that from week to week, you really only want to add maybe a couple of reps to each of your sets, or you might want to add a third or fourth set to an exercise that you're doing. So for example, you might want to start on the first week with 3 sets of 6 squat patterns. That might be sitting to a chair and standing up, or actually doing a full maybe squat to parallel or even below. And then the next week on that same day, maybe it's Monday, you decide, okay, this week I'm going to do 3 sets of 8 squats, or 3 sets of 7 squats. Or you may decide, okay, I'm going to do 4 sets of 6 squats. And progressing yourself slowly in this way, just adding a little bit at a time, is going to help you adapt in a way that's safe and sustainable. And it's going to give you an opportunity to check in with your body and see how sore you're feeling, and make sure that you're doing this in a way that feels okay, feels good, isn't making you overly tired or overly sore. Tip number 4, checking in with your body. This one's a little tricky. This kind of takes a back seat a lot of the time, I think, for a lot of queer and trans folks, simply because our bodies and our relationship with our bodies are complex and complicated. However, when I say check in with your body, what in this context, what I mean is checking in to see, am I feeling pain? Am I feeling soreness? How is it feeling when I do this movement? And this checking in with your body is important from a safety standpoint when you're doing strength training, just because pain or a lot of soreness are actually indicators from your body that maybe something, the way that you're moving or loading something, it isn't necessarily safe for a particular joint. Or if you're overly sore, maybe your body's telling you, hey, slow down, we did a little too much. And checking in and understanding these signals just gives you an opportunity to understand a little bit more about how to move forward safely, so that there isn't this sort of pushing and getting hurt and then having to stop and then maybe start again, or perhaps this sort of pushing to the point of feeling really sore so much that even everyday movements, just getting out of your seat the next day is extremely painful and sore. That is your body's way of telling you, hey, we maybe did a little much and we need a little more rest. And that's sort of in tandem here is rest, and recovery in strength training is just as important as the training itself, the pushing the muscles itself. So really checking in with your body and getting a sense of when it needs rest and time to recover. Tip number 5 is to ask for support. And what I mean by this is finding somebody, a trainer, a friend, somebody that you sort of know and trust, who has some experience with strength training, who can help you when you get stuck learning a movement, or maybe aren't sure if something is feeling the way it's supposed to feel when you're doing it. So finding somebody that you can trust and who you feel safe with to help you when you need help is really, really key. And reaching out is really, really key too. And something that I think is wonderful is this Transmasculine Trainer series, because I think it provides that sort of reach out and help and ask in a way that's maybe a little more safe and affirming and accessible. Hey, my name's S. I use they, them pronouns. I am a queer and non-binary personal trainer. I work primarily with queer and trans folks with a focus on movement and strength training. I am offering an alternative to traditional gym settings and working with folks to learn the basics of the fundamental movement patterns, pushes, pulls, squats, hinges, rotations, in a way that feels safe and accessible and affirming. My background is in strength training, in Olympic weightlifting, and powerlifting. I do offer some instruction in those sports as well. And I am able to support people at home with whatever equipment they have available, whether that be weights and kettlebells and bands, or traditional gym equipment, or maybe more non-traditional loading like backpacks and books and other things to add resistance to movements. I really emphasize finding ease and joy in these movements and focusing on building sustainable habits and ways of training that allow for longevity. My goal is primarily to offer movement and strength training to folks who don't necessarily have any background or haven't ever had that kind of training instruction before, and also to offer an alternative to getting that instruction in a traditional gym setting. For the most part, all of my instruction is one-on-one and personalized, so it is all about centering the person that I'm working with and their body and their experience in their body, and finding ways to move that feel good and empowering to them. My hope is really to offer some guidance and instruction to folks who are looking to begin this type of fitness journey and maybe reinvent or reimagine or renegotiate a relationship with fitness and perhaps with their bodies as well, with the hope that over time, people are able to learn and develop these skills and take them with them into their day-to-day lives and into their own personal journeys with fitness after working with me.